Hey everyone, welcome back to BDG Reviews. I decided to go with like a bit of a new little show, if you will, that I'm gonna do. I'm calling this My Theory. Now, you'd think with a title like that, I'd be giving my theory about like movies or whatever. Not necessarily. What I'm doing here is I'm picking movies. I'm picking, you know, like remakes, prequels, sequels, whatever, and just saying like how I think, like, if I'd been given control, someone's like waved a magic wand and said, okay, you now have control over this entire movie. What would you do different? What would you keep the same? What would you add, or remove from this movie, to make it work? Um, I decided to set myself a few ground rules. Like, there's this one, you've read the the title. This is going to be about Pet Sematary, this one, but I'll give you an example using like Nightmare on Elm Street. If I do one on Nightmare on Elm Street, which I probably will at some point, the ground rules are there are certain things you don't mess with. Like Nightmare on Elm Street, you don't mess with the fact that Freddy's burned. You don't mess with the fact that he kills kids. You don't mess with the fact he's got the glove and the claw and everything. You know, you keep that all intact, but I'm free to do whatever I want with everything else. That's the basic idea of this video series. So, Pet Sematary. More in particular, Pet Sematary Bloodlines. Um, I've said before, it's an okay movie. It's nothing. It's nothing really special, but they didn't do it right. So, magic wand has been waved. I've been given full control over a Pet Sematary prequel. How am I gonna make it? So first thing we got to do, we have to set the rules. What can I keep? What can I get rid of? Essentially, what I get to keep is Judd Crandall as the main character. The whole plot of, is it Tommy Baterman or whatever, the guy that brought his son back from the dead, who was like got killed in the war, and the whole idea of the Pet Cemetery. Other than that, I can go wild with it. So first things first, this is something I've always kind of thought with Pet Cemetery, but it's never been played up. They always say, like the land is sour or whatever, what was this land originally made for? What was the reason for this place existing? And the conclusion that I would come up with, I would do in the thing, if anyone has seen the movie Wakewood, you'll know where I'm going with this. My idea is this. Back in the day, a long time ago, if people died and the family didn't get to say goodbye and stuff like that, you could go there, bury your loved one, they'd come back, and they could stay for maybe 3 or 4 days or whatever, and you'd get to say goodbye and everything, and then they'd move on to the afterlife. That's that would be my addition to the backstory. But in the past, something happened. As to what that was, we don't know. But something happened, the land soured. So now, you put someone dead in there, they come back wrong, and there's nothing you can really do about it. Everything dead that goes in there comes back wrong now. So that is the backstory that I would set for this. What would I add other than that? I would add the Wendigo. It's been hinted at in the remakes, like the Wendigo, but I would make it an actual physical creature. Like in the woods, that's that's part of the woods, and it'd be like almost this is something that came to be because of the misuse of this site. Almost like a devil of their own making. Um, I would have a plot line that runs with that. I would also play up what makes Pet Sematary scary. And what makes Pet Sematary scary, I've said this before, I'll always say this, because the new movies, they don't really seem to get it. What makes Pet Sematary scary is the thought of, what if this time it works? You know, my, like, I don't know, my kid has died or whatever. Um, what if this time it actually brings them back right? And it's insidious because anyone who's had anyone die in their family or whatever, what you wouldn't do for more time, can you really blame anyone in the Pet Sematary movies? They know nothing good's going to happen, but they still do it because maybe this time it'll work. Maybe this time it'll be different. So this would play back into the backstory, in that, that's essentially what this was for originally. And I'd have it, like maybe written in some like books or something, like this is, like ancient like folklore or whatever. This is like what this was for. So people would go in with the idea that, that's what they're going to get. But the land's sour. So you don't get that anymore. Now, you get something else back. One thing also I always thought was kind of an idea that could be played with would be the idea that certain things don't come back too wrong. I know it was either in the book or it was in one of the movies or whatever, but Judd Crandall was talking about, like, he brought his dog back, and then like a few years later when the dog died again, they just buried it normally. So the idea that it came back sort of wrong, but it was still feasible enough that it could exist as, their pet. I would play something like that up. Because the fact of the matter is, like, let's be honest, you watch any of the Pet Sematary movies, they put like a dog in the ground, they put a cat in the ground, they put whatever in the ground, it comes back extremely wrong. Like, so wrong that it'd be like, you would never, logically, you would never want to put like a human in there. But that's what you get, Yeah. So, we've got that. We've got the backstory set up. We've got, the actual, the mechanics of it set up. So now we get into the movie itself. The main star would be Judd Crandall, obviously. Now, unlike in Bloodlines, where he's just, he doesn't get drafted for the army because of some, conspiracy of like, they all know and they have to guard, the Pet Cemetery, anything like that. No, none of that. I'd just have it something like, dude has a medical issue, he can't be drafted, so he has to stay back at home. I'd leave out, like, in there, any of the plot of, going to join the Peace Corps or whatever. Essentially, I would have it just, Judd Crandall, living in Maine. He meets his wife or whatever. They're going about their business. In the meantime, you got your guy whose son has been killed in the war. He brings him back, and right away, everyone seems to notice something's wrong. They all believe that it's due to the fact that he's been over in Vietnam. He's probably shell shocked. He's probably got tons of PTSD. He has issues. But it would quickly become evident that this is more than that. And it would become evident, I would feel, in something that, like, you've brought this person back from the dead. Obviously, they're not properly alive. So, they're still going to be decaying. Maybe he starts, like, people run into him and they all start noticing a smell. Or maybe something doesn't look right in the face anymore. And people begin to realize, and at this same point, you have Judd Crandall realizing what's going on. And you have him confront the father. Not his father, the father of the kid. And essentially say, like, what's going on here? Like, tell me. And eventually the father guy would break down and he'd tell me, he'd be like, my kid came back dead. I couldn't take it. I took him up to the pet cemetery. And that's kind of where you would get, this part in the story is where you would get the backstory. You'd get, the whole thing about, like, he'd read in, like, some folklore or whatever that if you buried someone there, you could bring them back for a while and be able to say your goodbyes and everything. But something went wrong. He's not, like, he's not going back. He's come back wrong. He's, like, killing people. He's killing, like, animals. He's doing really creepy stuff. There is an issue here. And then you would have, the movie would end with Judd Crandall and the father eventually figuring it out and, setting the house on fire and him and his kid burning to, like, a final death. And Judd left with this memory of what happened, but also having this memory of knowing that, it wasn't always like that. I think it just would have worked better that way. This is just my opinion, obviously, but that's what I would have done. Would it have been perfect? Probably not. The only way you're going to get that story told perfectly is to have Stephen King write that story, and I don't know whether he ever would, but it would be interesting to see because, it's a kind of a neat idea. So yeah, that's my idea. That's my theory for a Pet Sematary prequel and how it could work. Let us know down below what you think. If you got any ideas of your own of something similar, like another movie or whatever, let it just be said. And we'll see what people think. But yeah, that's it for me. See you next time.